and said, "The world has abandoned us. We're doomed, and very few of us, if any, will survive. The horror that's in store for us is not going to go away. But if by any miracle one of you does survive, remember, you have a mission. Indeed, an obligation to tell the world of what happened here." Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, the Heschel School, for allowing me to fulfill this mission. Roshica, small town in eastern Poland, about 75 miles east of Warsaw. Small town where 81 years ago I was born. Small town, very much like hundreds of small towns in Eastern Europe. Small towns where many of your parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents were born and came here to this country and other countries from places like that. My family lived in this town for over 500 years. No, Poland is not known to have been a country friendly to the Jews. But I have to say that in my case, even though I did encounter anti-Semitic activities, yes, occasionally a rock was thrown at me on the way to school. Occasionally a rock was thrown into a Jewish home, breaking the window, and occasionally I was called a dirty Jew on the way to school. Nevertheless, I would say I had a normal life. I had my grandparents, two of them whom you see here. My parents, their wedding picture in 1927, year before I was born. Family members, uncles, aunts, some of them who eventually moved to the United States. And I, at the age of 5, and my sister at the age of 2.5, as you can see, looking very happy and well taken care of. And we lived in a house which is still standing today, in the second floor, many rooms, my father being a merchant, and I could say I lived fairly well. I had friends, both Jewish and Christian, collected stamps, skated in the winter, attended school in the morning, and Hebrew school in the afternoon, and I was a very happy child. All of this ended on the 1st of September 1939. First day of school. On the way to school, the principal and some of the teachers told us to go back home. The German army just invaded the country. Within minutes, within days, we knew that the war was lost. The Polish army consisted mainly of cavalrymen. They had no chance with a saber on the top of a horse to fight a tank, although some of them did try. And we knew that it's only a question of weeks before the war will be lost. Only 8 days after the war started, I noticed these 3 heavy planes flying over the town, and suddenly about 50 bombs fell on us, a town of not more than about 8,000 people. And within 50 minutes, 55 people were dead and 150 hurt. All of them happened to be Jewish because the town was about 75% Jewish. It was very hard for us to understand why would a country send 3 heavy bombers to bomb a small place like that where there are absolutely no soldiers, no factories. Only later did we find out that indeed it was the Nazis did have a purpose. Because in our town, we had a synagogue that was well over 100 years old, very well known, where people from the entire neighborhood used to come and pray on Saturday. And to the Nazis, indeed, house of prayer was a military target. The Germans arrived. You can still see some houses burning. But they didn't stay very long. England and France declaring war on Germany. They had to go back and defend their sort of western border. For a few weeks, there were no soldiers, no policemen. But sure enough, sometimes in mid-October, about 24 Nazi policemen arrived, and they settled in the building of the school, the building where I attended school up to and including 5th grade. Almost, and I want to point out one of the teachers who later on will come up also, who was my teacher, the one with the glasses. And I had him so many times, in my 3rd grade, in my 5th grade. Well, in the school that you saw before, about 24 assessment, Gestapo people, Schutzpolizei, and an assortment of others settled. Within days, we realized something is happening and it is not going to be pleasant. And one morning I woke up, noticed a number of women walking, crying in the square below. We asked them what happened. They said the men were taken away in the middle of the night by this policeman. In the afternoon, a nearby farmer came by and he said he went into the woods to collect some mushrooms, and he came across a dozen corpses. And this were the 12 men who were taken the night before. The Nazis didn't have any names. They just said a number. They had to fulfill a quota. And in every town and village in Poland, this is what happened. The only crime being the fact that of the Jewish faith. A few weeks later, again, looking down from my apartment, from my house, into the square below, I saw 3 trucks coming. Young soldiers in black uniforms jumped up, picked up about 52 people, 2 12-year-old boys, 2 women, and the rest men. brought him to that school that you see here, and then proceeded what they called an Aktion, consisted of taking out burlap sacks, putting it over the heads of these people, and then with nail-studded bats started hitting them over the body and head and head. And when they collapsed, they picked them up by their legs and hands, threw them out the window into the sidewalk below. Immediately, a whole number of wars started coming out. But before that, a poster came out, and they said that children can go back to school, but only up to and including 6th grade. They gave us separate building, not the school where they were, and they said we are allowed to go to school. And the reason why it's only up to 6th grade, because after all, this is Poland, a country of Untermenschen, country of people who are Slavs, and they are of a lower type of people, do not deserving to have schooling beyond 6th grade. After all, they're going to be only slaves working for the Germans, and just a little arithmetic and some writing is enough. But I decided to go anyway, even though my father warned me. About 30 of us were sitting in the back of the room, and the teacher proceeded to give us a lesson in Polish history. And as he talked, a man in a black uniform walked in, a tall man. We, 11 years old, looked at him. It was sort of unusual. He told the teacher to stop and addressed himself to the children, saying, "Could you please tell me if there are any Jewish children amongst you?" 11 years old, looking at each other a little bit intimidated by this man, kept quiet and repeated the question again. He said, "Don't be afraid, just tell me, are there children amongst you?" Again, no answer. He started working back and forth and pulled out a fist from this pocket, and as he approached the teacher, wham, hit the teacher in the face so hard that he fell down, and then with his boot proceeded to kick him in the stomach, addressing himself to the teacher, saying to the children, "Are you going to tell me now there are any Jewish children? Do you want me to kill him?" A boy pointed in my direction. Before he was able to get to me, I was fortunate enough to run out of the class. And only later did we find out this man, a captain in the SS, before the war, was an assistant principal in a high school in Hamburg. It is at that time that we soon came to realize that Germany, a powerful, modern, supposedly cultured country, marshaled all of its resources, technical, legal, and military, to first isolate, then degrade, dehumanize, and persecute the Jewish people, that eventually led to murder. In a premeditated way, step by step, each succeeding action more hurtful. The process continued without stop. We were forced to wear armbands with the Star of David on it. We were forbidden to enter theaters, restaurants, bars, or use public transportation. We could not walk in the sidewalk, only in the gutter. Jews were not allowed to practice their professions, and their businesses were confiscated. Most young men and some women were sent to forced labor camps. Some never to be heard of again. What do you do with about 800 children that could no longer go to school? It was right after that incident that I described before, another poster came out, and they said, Jewish children are not allowed to go to any school. Any child found studying in any way will be arrested. Well, a number of parents and some teachers, including even 2 Christian teachers, got together and we opened what we would call a clandestine school. In attics, in cellars, in all kinds of hiding places. Not more than 4 or 5 of us would gather with a few books. The teacher would come and we'd continue our lessons in that manner. Hebrew, Jewish history, the Bible, and all regular subjects taught in normal schools. This is the way I was able to absorb and study during my 6th, 7th, and later on to get to my 8th grade. And later on in 1941, when the town was surrounded by literally tens of thousands of German soldiers getting ready to attack the Soviet Union because we were very close to that border, the time came for me to have my bar mitzvah. Yes, it was not a pleasant time. The soldiers would amuse themselves by picking up 9, 10-year-old Jewish girls, bring them to the barracks, and ask them to clean the windows and the floors. And these poor girls did not have any mops, obviously. They made them take off their little blouses and skirts and use those as rags to clean the barracks. Or they'd take old men in the late 70s and 80s, give them shovels and tell them to shovel snow. Of course, they could not do it, and they made them lie down for half an hour, semi-nude in the snow. And it was the time that came for my bar mitzvah. No, we could not have it in a synagogue, obviously. We decided to have it in my home. My teacher, Simyatitsky, prepared me very, very well. I knew my Hebrew, I knew my Parsha. I sure was able to give a fairly good speech. No, we did not have any cake. Some dog bread had sufficed. No, we did not have any wine. Some muddy juice had to suffice. But I carried it out fairly well. But that, just as I was finishing yet, a squad of 6 of the soldiers that I mentioned before bursted into the house with bayonets, started screaming, "Alle raus, raus!" And they chased us all into the street. They took all the men and marched us to a road where they gave us heavy hammers, shovels, told us to break up some big rocks and make it into gravel to fix the road so that in a few weeks when they were attacking the Soviet Union, the road will be done. We worked away, and we noticed as long as we worked, the soldiers did not pay too much attention to us, upon which the Hebrew teacher gathered 6 of his students who happened to be there, I and my friends. And as we banged away with our hammers and with our shovels, we continued with the lesson of next day. Yes, our culture, our history was very important to us, and learning never ceased. Later on, the ghetto was formed. 8,000 Jewish people from my town and from the nearby villages were squeezed into a few square blocks. Nobody was allowed to leave. Any person caught without permission would be shot on the spot. Yes, the Germans would entertain themselves to go on the top of a building, and what they would call hunting meant they would take pot shots at men, women, and children walking in the street while they were taking drink or vodka or schnapps or whatever. That was part of their entertainment. No coal or wood was allowed into the ghetto. In Poland, the weather in the wintertime goes down to maybe 10 below zero. Food consisted of a quarter of a pound of bread, occasionally potatoes. No medical facilities were available. Water had to be brought from the outside in a few barrels, barely enough for drinking, never mind for washing and so on. And people started dying by the droves. Every morning we'd wake up and see corpses lying on the square covered up with a piece of newspaper, sometimes for as long as a week. The Germans would allow only once a week a car to come, pile these corpses, and take them to a mass grave in the cemetery. Hunger was one of the worst. And during that period of time, a cousin of mine showed up. The one that you see on your right, about 5, 6 years older than myself. And he told us a gruesome story. As the Germans in 1941 proceeded deep into the Soviet Union, they came to the town where he lived, gathered 800 of the Jewish people, men, women, and children, brought them to a place where a ditch was dug, and shot every one of them. He managed to escape. He had a bullet in his shoulder. And he told us that this is going on not only in the town we live, but all over Eastern Europe. And sooner or later, this thing will happen in our town, all over Europe, wherever the Germans are. I will never forget the prayers on Saturday, on holidays, in small little rooms. Like our brethren thousands of years ago in Let, were praying on Narod, Babel, Samyashavnu, Bahim. So that we, and Narod, Europa, Samyashavnu, Ubahinu, like the rivers of Europe, we sat and we wept. In Amakim, Kawasichoyo, from the depth of our pain, of our frustration, we called out, Ma'ayin Yavoezi, where and when will our redemption come? It didn't. Neither Roosevelt in America, Churchill in England, and definitely not Stalin in Russia considered coming to our rescue. We were expendable, not important for the war effort. So the only thing we could do, especially after we heard the story from my cousin, we built a hiding place in the attic of our building. You see that triangle there with a hole in there, right behind it, we built a second wall with a trap door on the bottom so that one person at a time could squeeze themselves in case of an emergency. And it wasn't soon enough. But then came that awful Saturday morning, Saturday, 22nd of August. I woke up to the sound of shooting going on. And when I looked down the window, I saw the entire ghetto surrounded by about 200 men in black and green uniforms. You can still see them, helmets, machine guns. And they announced that every Jew in the ghetto has to come down immediately. We have 1 hour to collect not more than 15 pounds of clothing or food. And any person who will remain in the building will be shot. You can see the people coming down. In the beginning, my father started getting me dressed in very warm clothing. After all, they said they were taking us to Russia, and in Russia it gets very cold. But it was about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I perspired heavily. Maybe because of that, or maybe because of the warning of my cousin, I started screaming at my father, saying, "If you want to go, you go, but I'm not." And ran back into the building, up the stairs, and into the hiding place with my father and my mother, and my 11-year-old sister and 10-year-old brother right behind me. Eventually, 27 people squeezed into this place, probably not much bigger than this, twice the size of this table. An hour passed, it was too late to go down. And as we looked down, we could see that an order was given, and as you can see, the column of people being marched in the direction of the railway station. About 100 or 150 people remained behind. These were mainly women with small infants, some old people, some sick people, a few women with a few strollers. The Germans told them that some trucks will come and take them to the railway station later on. Sure enough, they did come, but they said they approached them, rifles came out of the trucks, and they started shooting. And what you see here now is the square of death that I had to see from that hole on the top of the hiding place that awful Saturday afternoon. Something very hard to erase from one's mind. We even had to see an officer come down from a truck and approach the 1 or 2 strollers that were left, take out a pistol and shoot the infant inside. These were the packages, the abandoned corpses and bundles that the people left on the way to that. This is the next picture, is the railroad station, where 30,000 Jews from 4 different towns, including our own, were assembled over a period of 4 days and 4 nights. The train would come, pick up 2,000, go away, come back 2 hours later, come back, until all 30,000 were taken away. And the place where they were taken is called Kristallnacht, second largest Jewish cemetery in the world today. Where 850,000 Jews were taken to be gassed and their bodies burned. This is the Kristallnacht as it looks today, a large monument with about 2,000 stones. Each one is inscribed with the name of a town and village from Europe, where Jews were brought to this place to be killed. And as I and my wife walked around a few years ago when we visited Poland, we went to Kristallnacht and my wife pointed out one of the stones with the name Košice, my town. All that was left of a wonderful, living, pulsating, cultural place my grandparents, uncles, aunts, teachers, cousins. What happened to me and my family in the hiding place? After 3 days and 3 nights, after running out of food and water, it was so hot. I'm not going to describe what happened in that place. My father finally decided to send me and my sister out and try to reach a nearby village where we knew some Polish peasants and try and ask them to hide us. Yes, they did indeed manage to get out of the ghetto without being seen. That time I was already 14, my sister 11. But as we came to that farm where my father sent me, the two parents ran out and they started screaming at us, "Dredge, get away, get lost, we don't want you here, you'll only bring trouble." Except the woman, the wife, when she saw my sister's gold earrings at her ears, came over and she said, "The Germans will find you very soon, they'll shoot you when you don't need them anymore." She proceeded to take them off her ears. Yes, we were caught. Polish policemen in service of the Germans, and a Nazi assessment found us. They brought us to the police station that you see here, and there they announced that because we did not go the Saturday before with the rest of the people, we were sentenced to death, execution to take place the same night. My wife pointed out to me something. She says they were trying to shoot you for refusing to be guests. They marched us to the jail, and they put us up on the 3rd floor of that jail. And sure enough, in the evening, about 11 o'clock, we heard 2 policemen come. They were talking to the jailer down below. He spoke Polish, they spoke German. There's some confusion going on between them. And as they started opening up their cells, they came to the 2nd floor. They came across a boy and a girl about a year or 2 older than us. The local police caught them stealing some clothing from the empty ghetto. And they put them in that cell. The Nazis refused them to us. They took them out and shot them. They forgot about us. We were still there 3 days and 3 nights without food and water. But eventually, when the jailer opened the cell, he realized the mistake. He said they don't come and shoot you, take care of you the next day. Yes, they did come, but in the daytime. They were a little bit surprised because executions were usually at night. And they marched us, but instead of bringing us to the execution place, they brought us to a labor camp. As it turned out, due to all the looting that was going on, the local people from the villages stealing things from the empty ghetto, the Germans wanted to stuff for themselves. Whoever they could find of the Jews who were still alive, they put it in a camp, and they put us to work. And it is at that time when a man showed up by the name of Eddie Weinstein, who happens to be the father of a gentleman who is right here, and the father of Susan, and the father-in-law of Susan Weinstein, and the grandfather of Sarah Weinstein, who's a student here. And he came back and told us the horrible story that he was one of the people who went with the rest of the people from my town into Treblinka. But after being there for close to 3 weeks, managed to escape. And he told us what happened to all of our people. And he still never ceased since then to tell that story. We knew it's only a question of days that we will be killed. We immediately started looking for a place to hide. Lo and behold, the same Polish policeman who arrested me and my sister, and transferred us to the Germans to be executed, somehow felt remorseful. We do not understand what happened to him. But he came to the labor camp, and he agreed, my father agreed, and he took my sister and hid her in one of the closets of his apartment and saved her that way. Another Polish farmer took my 10-year-old brother, brought him to a place in the open field. This is my brother, age 9. A year later, that man owned literally hundreds of haystacks, the way you see here. And in one of those haystacks, took out 2 bales of hay, put in some blankets, and put in this 10-year-old boy, covered it with hay, and left a few open spaces so that he could breathe. Every third day, he would bring some food. And in one haystack like that, my brother lived close to 2 years with hardly ever seeing another human being. And as far as my rest of my family, a cousin and his family, approximately 17 miles from our town, we found this farmer with 3 daughters. And in this pigsty that you see behind them, we dug a hole about 9 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 4.5 feet deep, covered it with some boards, manure on the top of the boards, and then about 5 pigs on the top of that. And with manure constantly falling over our heads, rats running over our bodies day and night, lice, bed bugs, loaf of bread every third day, and some water for drinking only. We never washed. We existed for close to 2 years until the fall of 1944, when we were liberated by the Russian army. We came out of this hole, which we called our Greek, the tomb, and came out into a large cemetery where 6,000 Jews were murdered by the Nazis. And out of the 8,000 Jewish people who lived in the ghetto, 16 of us came back. I could no longer live in Poland. I saw shadows, my friends, my relatives. And one day, without my parents knowing, I ran away from home. I found out that they were smuggling Jews to Palestine. I smuggled myself through 6 borders, Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Austria, eventually came to Italy, where for a short while I was stationed with the Jewish Brigade. My parents eventually joined me. The Italian people, I have to admit, were wonderful. They helped us tremendously, they fed us. They really treated us like humans. It's there where I finally decided that life is worth living after all. And the only relatives that we still had, my father's brother, who came here in 1938, decided to bring us to the United States. We came here in 1948. Within 4 years, I, my brother, and my sister graduated from the university. I got married. I went into the army, where I served for 2 years. Of course, where would they send me, but not to Germany. I had 2 wonderful children. I had a wonderful career as a pharmacist. And I can say today, I am a happy man. I have 6 wonderful grandchildren, and I'm an optimist. And I would like to stress that Jacqueline and I did not come here only to make you hear tales of horror and brutality. As you heard 8 years ago, among the many letters I received from students, one came from a 16-year-old girl called Jacqueline Yurikakete, who's sitting right here. And I'm going to quote from that letter. At one time, I, like you, had a feeling of guilt for being alive. Why was I left? I asked myself. I never really got the answer to that, but now I'm thankful that I was left. Maybe I can make a difference in this world if I try, and maybe I can do my part in making sure that no other human being goes through the same experience that you and I did. A letter from a 16-year-old. There's Jacqueline. She's a true testament to human resiliency. She and I indeed have proven that one can make a difference. Diversity does not have to be adversity. I, a senior, white, male, Jewish, from Europe. She, still very young, black, female, Christian, from Africa. Yet our bond transcends all of these differences. Both of us met death and evil head-on, yet we came back without allowing rancor and bitterness to overwhelm us. We did find freedom, and we started our life with dignity. And we set ourselves on a mission to speak for those who can no longer speak, a mission to immunize ourselves and others against the most infectious disease of our time, hate. Hate, the source of prejudice, bigotry, racism, and anti-Semitism. In the age of weapons of mass destruction, we assembled our own arsenal of weapons, and we call it weapons of mass instruction. Books, exhibits, dialogues, conversation, discussion. These are our rifles, our bombs, our self-propelled grenades. And our weapons do not kill, they heal. They have no room for children blowing themselves up for any cause. We are the veterans of Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Cambodia, Bosnia, Rwanda, Darfur, and since 9/11, New York and Washington. And we are called the survivors. And as survivors, we hope that our voices will be joined by a chorus of decent people all over the world, so that Holocaust and genocides will be confined to the pages of history. And as a Jew, I no longer despair. My generation witnessed the worst that happened to the Jewish people, but also the rebirth of a nation of Israel in our own ancient homeland. Here in America, we live free, secure, and accepted. Many vibrant Jewish communities exist in many corners of the world. A short while ago, you heard a beautiful rendition of Hatikva. Hatikva, hope. Our national anthem indeed has become a reality. Even in the worst of times, Jewish partisans in the forests and fighters in the ghettos used to sing Zog mit Kemo as begehst du letzte Weg. From the ever say, this is the end of the road. Es wird erbeugten unser Fried, wir sind da. Like a drumbeat, our steps will proclaim, we are here. Am Israel. I. Thank you.
I'm going to get comfortable and just talk to you for a few minutes. I won't keep you long. I know it's been a long evening. But I want to talk to you about the obligation that you heard from our two speakers. That's okay. The obligation that you heard from our two preceding speakers about speaking up, standing up, speaking out about preventing anything like what they went through from happening again to others. But I would suggest to you, and I feel very strongly that we, particularly as Jews, have a further obligation. And that is to do something for those who have survived. My personal story and my journey into this world started in November of 2005, when I, doing another program that I'm involved with at Tufts University, first learned of the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide. The fact that there were 1.2 million orphans, and this was in 2005, November 2005, who were left in the aftermath of the genocide with really no future. And in talking to people from Rwanda, there was a perception that with no systemic solution to that problem, there was no future for the country. And it occurred to me, really on that night, during that conversation, that if you look at Israel today, and let me just say one other thing, if you look at Rwanda today, which is now 3 years later, and you look at those statistics, there are now, the population has grown to 10 million people. And the percentage of orphans and vulnerable children, there are now 2.8 million orphans and vulnerable children in Rwanda. That is because children are having children. The majority of the population, 60%, is under age 20. And when you leave children to grow up without any adult supervision, they are having children when they are children. And they are leaving those children by the wayside, and there is an explosion of orphans in Rwanda. When I first heard those statistics, it occurred to me that Israel had suffered, the Jewish people had suffered a genocide. Israel had taken in the remnants of Europe, those orphans, and Israel today did not have an orphan problem. What had they done? I knew that they had created youth villages. I didn't know a lot about them, I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that there was no orphan problem today, and I thought perhaps this was a solution for Rwanda. And so I began to do research, and literally sitting in my apartment on the internet, just research about youth villages. I found out about a youth village in Israel called Yamin Ord, and somebody put me in touch with a person who was then the director of Yamin Ord, Dr. Chaim Perry. And I, sitting in my apartment, I wrote him an email and said, "Dear Dr. Perry, here's my idea about creating a youth village in Rwanda, what do you think?" And he said, "Why don't you come on over, we'll talk about it." So in April of 2006, I went to Israel with a friend of mine who had quit her job in the financial services business and decided she wanted to join me doing what we weren't quite sure. But we went to Israel, we met with Dr. Perry and spoke to him about, really my goal there was to figure out whether there was a model that could be adapted and taken to Africa. And our conversation began that day. He had amassed a group of about 25 people at Yamin Ord to meet with us. And the conversation really began with, where is Rwanda and why should we care? And by the end of the day, and I should mention most of the people sitting around the table were Ethiopian Israelis, because they were the generation that had been in the last 10, 15 years growing up in the youth villages in Israel. And at the end of the day, the conversation became, why don't you have anyone for us to work with in Rwanda, and where can we go? Because the message was clear, that these were people who had gone through what we had gone through. And for the Ethiopian Israelis, there was an additional element. This was going back to Africa to take something that had been given to them and to share it. And I'll talk in a minute about the philosophy of the youth village. It's very much part of what youth villages are all about. And so I'm going to just give you a very brief run through of what I did, and feel free to go to the website and get all the details. But in the summer of, right after that meeting, 3 weeks later, I went to Rwanda, and I, you have to understand, did not know one Rwandan at this particular point in my life. I came back to the States, and I called everybody that I knew that knew anybody that may know a Rwandan, and asked them all who they knew in Rwanda and whether they would talk to us. And we literally got on a plane, went to Rwanda, met with anybody that would meet with us, and spoke to them about the youth village concept. It was something that lit up people's eyes and hearts, and they knew right away that this was something that they needed, and they needed desperately. I came back to the States. I'd been working on the Save Darfur campaign, and one of the women I worked with said to me, there's a woman, because again, I was still looking for Rwandans everywhere I went to see if this is an idea that would resonate with them. I just wanted to talk to anybody about the idea. And this woman said to me, there's a woman in Boston whose name is Sifa Nsengimana, who you should go and talk to. And so I hopped on a plane and I went to Sifa, and I showed her this little write-up that I had done about this youth village I was going to build in Rwanda, and asked her, I knew that I needed a Rwandan to work with, and I asked her if she knew of anybody who she thought would be interested in working with me. And she said, give me a few days to think about it. And she called me a few days later and she said, I have some names for you. And I said, before you do that, how about you? And just by worlds of coincidence, Sifa is the aunt of Jacqueline's fiance. So Sifa and I went off to Rwanda the summer of 2006 and met with, at that point, any government agency, department, ministry that would touch on our children. So the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health. It was all about, here's what we want to do, what do we need to do, and to satisfy whatever you need, and is this something that you want? We came back to the States in September of 2006. It was now my friend Tina, Sifa, and myself, and we sat around and we said, okay, now what do we do? Do we form our own NGO, our own international organization? What would we do? And the brilliant idea occurred to me that it might be a good idea to find someone to house us rather than to try and create our own 501c3 organization, get our own charitable status, and get some support. And to cut a very long story short, the JDC, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, took us in. We became a special project. They housed us. They do all of our back office. We live there. We have office space there. And we embarked upon building this youth village in Rwanda. We started in September of 2006. I went to Rwanda and we hired part of our philosophy is very much to do everything. It's about building a youth village by Rwandans, for Rwandans, staffed by Rwandans, and eventually which will be totally run and financed by Rwandans. And so we hired a Rwandan architectural firm, Rwandan Builders, and we broke ground August 17th of 2007, and Rowena was there for the great occasion. Rowena very kindly served on our advisory board and still does, and helps us out on the educational aspects of the village. And we have always set very unrealistic goals. In August of 2007, we said we want to take in our first 125 kids December of 2008. So builders, build whatever we need to take in our first 125 kids. And December 15th of last year, we took in our first 125 kids. They have just completed their first year of school. And we are gearing up to take in another 125 kids on December 21st of this year. Our goal is to take in 125 kids every year. The village population is, we can handle 500 kids, plus about 200, 250 people to take care of them and their families. And our goal will be, we are doing the last 3 years of high school in Rwanda in 4 years. Our first year is a catch-up year. We teach everything from English, computers. Most of our kids have not spoken a word of English when they come to us. As Jacqueline mentioned, French has been the traditional language in Rwanda, although about 8 months ago the government passed a decree that all higher education has to be in English. And so our language of instruction and our language of the village, the kids in their homes speak Kinyarwanda, but our public language, to the extent we can, we talk English because it's really important to reinforce the English skills. But the goal is to have 500 kids, graduating 125 every year, and bringing in 125 every year. The village philosophy is very much based on that everybody in life has a timeline. There's a past, a present, and a future. And for our kids, there has been a break between the past and the present, which really prevents most of them from living in the present. Most of them are living in a place where they're worrying about where their next meal is coming from. and they don't even have the luxury of dreaming about a future. Our goal becomes, how do you repair that break? And in the village, we talk about 2 circles of repair. Tikkun Halev, repairing the heart, and Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. The Tikkun Halev therapies are those therapies that are directed at the individual child. Is it music, art? What is it that's going to make them feel good about themselves? How can they get support? We have a medical clinic that has both mental and physical health services. What do they need in the mental health department? And I will tell you that all of our children are severely traumatized in one fashion or another. Although they are extraordinary in one fashion or another, all of them. And so, again, the Tikkun Halev is really what can we do for this individual child to build up their self-esteem, to let them live. And the Tikkun Olam therapies are really, Tikkun Olam repairing the world. We really very strongly believe that it's through doing for others that you heal yourself. And so every child who lives in the village has the obligation to engage in Tikkun Olam activities to do for others outside of the village in a framework that we help organize. The village today, it consists of 32 5-bedroom children's houses. There are 16 kids in a house. Each child lives with a house mother and has a counselor who is a young Rwandan university graduate who is assigned to their house. We have a community center that has a dining hall that seats 800 people, because very soon we will have 700 people on a regular basis at our meals. We have a high school that's built for 500 kids, complete with computer lab, science labs, really a state-of-the-art high school. Our village is wireless. They're building this youth village, although it was totally intended to be and is focused upon repairing these children, healing these children, and giving them a new life. It has become an opportunity because it is in the developing world, because it is a country that is recovering. We have been able to bring from Israel computer technology, a new methodology that's taught in the high school, a completely different educational methodology, mediated learning, which is not something that is practiced traditionally in Rwanda. We have a farm that will eventually feed ourselves completely. It will be self-sustaining and also be able to sell goods, because in a country that does not know irrigation, we have modern agricultural farming. We bring irrigation from Israel. We are teaching our children. They are teaching their neighbors. We have a forestation program that we're about to embark on with Keren Kayemet Israel, the Israeli Forestation Department. Rwanda, like much of that part of Africa, is completely denuded. Reforestation is critical. It once again provides our kids with a skill. Our high school is state-of-the-art. It is a math science high school. We, even though we do no educational testing for our children, strongly believe that if you give the kids the right environment and the right support, they will perform, and I promise you most of them will. Those who cannot or don't want to go to university still have an incredibly important function, and we can give them jobs that are very much needed in that economy. Our goal, when you ask me what success is for Agahozo Shalom, and I should tell you that Agahozo is a Kenya-Rwanda word that means a place where tears are dried, and Shalom, as you know, is peace. For us, success means that our children can get married, have kids, be healthy, stable, be able to hold down a job, and understand that it is important that they give back to their community. I will tell you that on the gates when you drive up to Agahozo Shalom, you see in Kenya-Rwanda and in English, in very bright, beautiful colors, if you see far, you will go far. This is a philosophy that our kids, they dream it, they live it, they see it, they feel it. And they will tell you all of their dreams, which have developed really in the last 9 months. And they often change, but everyone has a part of their dream is about giving back to others, doing for others, and making sure that others are able to receive what they've been able to receive. One of the things that we've also built at the village, and I'm going to wrap it up soon, I promise, but one of the things we've also built at the village is guest housing. We've built graduate housing so that when our students leave and do go off to university or wherever they go in life, there is always a place that they can come back to and call home. When they want to get married, this will be their home that they come back to. When they want to bring their kids for a weekend with the family, this will be where they come back to. But we've also built visitor housing because this village also gives us a unique opportunity to teach. And to teach many groups, and we will bring many groups, whether they're Hill groups from universities or interfaith groups or church groups, synagogue groups. But to me, the most important group, as a Jewish mother, are our young Jewish children. Because I can tell you, my kids grew up in Heschel, and they studied the Holocaust, and they are connected. They have a home in Israel, they speak Hebrew. They are very Jewish. But for them, like for many of our children, the Holocaust happened long ago and far away. And it is a story that they're told, and within a couple of generations, it will be the story like the coming out of Egypt. For us, Rwanda presents an incredible opportunity. I can tell you from taking my kids to Rwanda, that when they go to the Memorial Museum in Kigali, which is an extraordinary museum, and they walk through the room, my son was there a couple years ago, and he kept a diary, which is actually on our website. It's called Letters from Rwanda. And there's a room in the Memorial Museum that is dedicated to the children, and it has the pictures of the children and what their favorite color was, what they liked to do, all these different facts about them and how they were killed. And Jason writes about walking around that room and realizing at age 17 that if those children had lived, they would be younger than he was. And he writes about, for the first time, how he understands when he walks around in that community what it means to have total devastation. And when he's then able to go to the village and sit with kids who lived through it, but who are so hopeful and so full of life and so full of the future and what they're going to do for the world, it changes your perspective. It changes your perspective. I think it changes your perspective even on being Jewish. The realization that Holocaust, genocide, is not about Jews, but is about people. And people do this to people. In some way, it is freeing. It enables us to feel part of humankind and to take part in repairing that. And I think